Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we're discussing a watch that soft launched back in 2019. This was a watch Audemars Piguet didn't really want to talk about. It was briefly shown to the press and, if anything, somewhat suppressed at inception. Why? Because the watch you see here was a sort of test balloon for future design directions that the Royal Oak Offshore might take, and with a balanced tri-register dial, it was in fact predictive of the future. So this 2019 model is the Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph, reference 26480TI. It's 42 millimeters in diameter, and because it uses an integrated chronograph and not a modular one, it's only 12.9 millimeters thick in grade 5 titanium, 54 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, and if we include these little intermediate links, the plots as they're called, then the total distance across the wrist remains a beefy 58.5 millimeters. Throwing it on my wrist, which is not beefy, at 16 centimeters circumference, you can see that it wears nicely. And it does straddle the wrist because there's an arc of the case. You can see the lugs are downturned, and that does mitigate against fit issues. But frankly, I wouldn't wear the watch on a wrist any smaller than mine. You can see how it's pushing right out to the edge, and the plots, the intermediate links, they might even be a little bit over the edge of my wrist here. So this is pushing the limits of what's possible. The saving grace, well, there's several. I would say there's three. One, the watch is incredibly light in sapphire and titanium. Two, the watch is incredibly thin for an offshore. And three, this diver-style rubber strap is more flexible than a comparable Audemars Piguet hornback alligator or bracelet. So this is really good, best-case scenario ergonomic type of combination for a smaller wrist and a Royal Oak Offshore. 16 centimeters circumference and up to ride. Taking a quick look at the strap, you can see it has a fine texture to it. It has strakes that extend visually the plots. We have a little bevel on the edge of the lug hoods that continues down the side of the strap, a lovely piece of attention to detail. The strap fixed to the case using screws and bars, a much more solid and reliable connection than spring bars, so I like to see that. You can see this is a brand new Audemars Piguet factory strap. It has not been gouged. And then we have a matching and simple Audemars Piguet satinated titanium pin buckle for quick on-the-fly adjustments. The case will be familiar as the Royal Oak Offshore is clearly descended from the original 1972 Royal Oak. In 1993, we got the first Royal Oak Offshore. It took the basic design language of the Gerald Genta Royal Oak, but made it bigger, made it sportier, more aggressive. Emmanuel Goetz's masterpiece, the Royal Oak Offshore, was originally a 42 millimeter watch, and so it is here. The big difference that this is made of grade 5 titanium, a material not initially available on the early 90s Royal Oak Offshore. Grade 5 is excellent because in addition to being hypoallergenic, it is both lighter than steel and more scratch resistant than standard 316 and 904L steels, so it's a very resilient material. The quality of the finishing is undiminished compared to a precious metal or steel Royal Oak. The faceting, the polish, the satination, the contrasts, the tiny surfaces, and the evenness of their finish, all of that is present and correct. This is a laborious watch to finish by hand. Here we have a hexagonal crown. You can see little shoulders of blue have been added to the chronograph, as well as the crown for winding and setting. Taking a quick look, you can see that the bezel, a rounded octagon. Gerald Genta, who created the first Royal Oak, was inspired to create this shape on a watch when he saw a vintage diving helmet. You'll also note that the hexagonal crown matches the hexagonal steel bolts, and they are bolts within the bezel. Screws could not be aligned like this, and a lot of folks never grasp that. They wonder why all screws on all watches aren't aligned. Well, these aren't screws. These are bolts, and there are nuts fixing their opposite sides inside the case. Now, we do have a screw-down crown. The watch is 100 meters water resistant, so an absolute sports watch through and through. Do a quick loom shot. You can see the watch is well loomed, easy to read in the dark. You can also see that some of the crown and pusher guard assemblies are fixed using hex screws, so if they get disfigured, they can be replaced. They are modular. The crown can be unscrewed, and then we can manipulate the watch Let's just make sure we're out of the date change danger zone there. The Frederic Piguet movement used here has a quick-set system, and Audemars Piguet design attention to detail has gotten better in recent years, and their date discs now match the font used on the remainder of the dial. So if you look at other parts of the dial, for example, if you compare other parts of the dial where you see the numeral 1 or 5, you will note that that 5 is, for example, the same 5 used on the chapter ring, and that one is the same font used on the chapter ring as well as the sub-registers. The dial is mega tapisserie, which means it is a large hobnail, and then we have silvered sub-registers for chronograph hours and chronograph minutes with anthracite centers. We have a crosshair anthracite small second down at 6 o'clock, all applied indices, AP logo. We have hands that were unique to this model that debuted on this model. The movement does not have hacking seconds because it doesn't use a JLC or an Audemars Piguet base. It actually uses a Frederic Piguet 1185 ultra-thin automatic integrated chronograph design. As a result, you don't look down through a tunnel at the date. If you're wondering why it's flush to the dial here and usually sunken into the dials on other Royal Oak offshores, it's because other Royal Oak offshores, in fact, most Royal Oak offshores made since the beginning, had a base automatic with a Dubois de Praz vertical clutch chronograph module on top. And when you looked at the date, you were peering down past the module at the base movement that actually featured the date. That's why the date always seems sunken into a tunnel, whereas here we have an integrated chronograph so that the date and the chronograph exist in the same plane, which is why this one is pushed right up against the dial. Also important, this is a vertical clutch system, so you'll note when I start it up, there's no jump, there's no stagger to the chronograph operation. The Frederic Piguet is a high-end automatic chronograph caliber, which was used for about 20 years on the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak chronograph, the standard Royal Oak chronograph. It's a 3 Hz beat rate, so 6 beats per second. It's a unidirectional automatic winder with a 40-hour power reserve. It's adjusted in 5 positions, pivots on 37 joules. It is thin, it is fine, it is under 6 millimeters thick total, and it uses a combination of a column wheel for crisp feel and sound, a real tactile pleasure to operate this chrono, and then the vertical clutch, which not only engages the chronograph without jump or stagger, but allows you to run the chronograph full time without additional wear and tear to the movement. And yes, it is a nicely decorated movement. I've seen it in many Blancpain pieces. It is gorgeous in here, so if you have any doubts about what lurks beyond the caseback, rest assured this watch is high horology through and through. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.